GMS is a distributor of building products, primarily drywall. That's about 40% of their business. They also do suspended ceilings. So think about those white mineral fiber ceilings you see with the metal grids. That's about 15% of the business. And also steel framing for commercial buildings, which is another 15. So the remainder of the business is things like tools and fasteners, joint compounds, things along those lines. So, we think the deal is pretty compelling from a strategic standpoint and what Home Depot is trying to do with the professional contractor. What they want to do is become a one-stop shop for contractors who are taking on big projects. So if you think about a contractor who's doing a large-scale remodel, typically they're juggling many supplier relationships, whether it's doors, windows, drywalls, flooring, you name it. So Home Depot wants to expand in that business, become the one-stop shop, and they're calling it a $200 billion opportunity.
Drew, I know the Home Depot is more focused on contractors, whereas you have Lowe's that's focused on the DIY market, but we are seeing shares of both companies down this year. Home Depot down about 6% and Lowe's down about 10%. What does this deal really tell you about what's going on right now in the building construction space?
So you're right. And I think a lot of the pressure on the stock has really been from the DIY side of the market. So consumers are still under a lot of pressure. We're seeing discretionary big ticket purchases put on pause. So things like kitchen and bath remodels, large scale flooring products. But I think what this deal tells us is that Home Depot sees better growth opportunity on the professional side of the business going forward. We think as the market starts to turn, there's a lot of pent-up demand for these big ticket projects, and I think that's kind of the rationale for this business. This is where the largest growth opportunity is going forward.
So let's step back a little bit, just kind of on the housing business in general here, Drew. Rates coming down a little bit. I'm looking at the 10-year Treasury now, 4.25% here. What's your mark? What are the home builders telling you these days?
So the home builders are echoing what we've kind of heard from Home Depot and Lowe's, and that's consumers are being increasingly cautious in the market. Obviously the number one thing impacting demand is still affordability with, rates in the high 6% range, home prices up 40 to 50% since prior to the pandemic. But at the same time, I think really since April, there's been a lot more caution in the market, whether, you have buyers who are simply waiting for either home prices or mortgage rates to fall, or you have people who are just more concerned with, the general outlook for the economy, whether, that be their jobs or any political uncertainty out there. So I think there's just a lack of urgency out there in the market right now. So I think it's going to take a combination of, prices coming in a bit, as well as rates coming back to kind of get things moving again.
What's been the impact of tariffs on the industry as well as the crackdown on undocumented workers?
Yeah, so to this point, the home builders haven't seen much of an impact as far as tariffs are concerned. The home building industry only imports about 7% of construction materials. China is the largest importer, so there will be some impact there. But all the builders we've heard from at this point have seen maybe a modest impact. But anything that they would expect to feel on the P&L really wouldn't be until 2026. But again, we think that's probably negligible. In terms of immigration, this has certainly been a headline risk for the group. The lack of labor in the home building industry has been a concern for years, really since the pandemic. You had people age out of the industry, people move into other industries as well. So, a lack of skilled labor when a market is starting to accelerate becomes a concern now. In terms of, ICE raids and illegal immigration, what's going to happen from a policy perspective, the home builders really haven't felt any pinch to this point. So really the headline risk is still out there. It's something to watch, but to the extent that it does become more of a problem, you'll start to see a battle for labor, and that's going to impact labor costs for the group.